So we're in another stream of consciousness type of thing. I'm still building assets out um, for my scare floor and stuff like that. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about, some people, if they watch this, might um, wonder what operating system I'm using, and it's a Linux operating system um, called Manjaro. The reason why is that it has a lot of tools and stuff that are already pre-installed in it to make my life a little bit easier when dealing with this stuff. But it's kind of interesting when we look at the history of some of these studios and stuff like that out there that have been doing, um, work for a very long time, is that they actually use Linux in house a lot, and there's been a lot of people that have been asking for it. I mean, if you think about it, the Unix type operating systems that have been out there um, for quite a while uh, have been used in AAA studios for, I would say, quite some time. And this all comes from basically the Silicon Graphics workstations. The Silicon Graphics workstations used to use a Unix-like operating system called IRIX. And IRIX used to have stuff like what people have been begging for a long time. Um, Photoshop that's been was produced for it, as well as Mac, which, when they got their start with Mac, it was it Macintosh is a Unix-like operating system, and so I think that's kind of funny because people have been asking for Photoshop to be in Linux for a long time, and it has always been on a Unix type of operating system like IRIX and Mac OS. But some of these studios have been using stuff here recently. They've been porting some of their stuff over, including like places like Pixar have been using CentOS for a while, which I think is also kind of strange because when they started, or one of the guys that worked at Pixar actually took over the Debian project, and so I thought it was kind of interesting that they're not using Debian in house, but rather CentOS. CentOS is based off of Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and so it is a very stable and a slow moving type of operating system. And basically, what they're looking for, especially if you're running studios, is to maintain stability and integrity within the system. And Linux offers that a little bit better than Microsoft Windows. Now, how did everybody end up getting to use Windows? Well, you know, back in the time of companies like Rhythm and Hughes, which was a complete Linux house, or almost complete Linux house, they used many types of in-house software that actually ran on Linux and got other types of software that ran on Linux. They used a new image manipulation program. A lot of the plugins that were developed for GIMP actually were contributed by Rhythm and Hughes. And so it's one of those things that when things kind of go out of business. So, for example, Lightwave 3D had come out on a video toaster, and eventually people started using the Amiga, and the Amiga used a Unix type operating system. And when you have Silicon Graphics using IRIX, which is a Unix type operating system, and then you have Rhythm and Hughes, an animation house which used a lot of Linux based stuff within their own house, and they kind of go out of business. The Amiga is not produced anymore. Rhythm and Hughes went, I believe they went bankrupt in 2008, and Silicon Graphics basically went out of business at about the same time, at about 2008. And so basically, Microsoft was there to kind of pick up the pieces of all these people who needed something or some sort of um, replacement, and they had a lot of uh, hardware support and all that other stuff, and had garnered relationships with a lot of different hardware vendors. And so you want to replace your system with something that actually works. And Microsoft was there to pick up the pieces, right? So a lot of people use that, but there is still a push for using Linux on a lot of things. And most of the developers of this software will actually say that their software is basically operating system agnostic. And that means that it doesn't matter what operating system it runs on, the operating system itself does not care. Oops, maybe I should do this first. The operating system that it runs on, it does not care about any of that stuff. So we're kind of, Jesus, I'm my wife again. Okay, sorry, I got a text message. So people have been begging for something that they could have been doing for a long time, but basically they're looking at the market. You know, what's marketable, and Linux has always had like this smear campaign against it for free and open source software. But if you're looking into what animation houses and stuff like that use, they want to use an operating system that has very robust file systems and very good transfer rates, and something that's going to be stable and carry them through. And also you want to have a cheaper type of alternative, especially if you're spreading out a whole bunch of licenses throughout your company for people to use. If you get enterprise support, that's one thing, but if you're getting enterprise support plus you have to buy the operating system, it gets to be a little bit cost prohibitive. So basically what they do is they have a bunch of workstations that people can work on. Their back end is Linux, like usually, like for example, Pixar uses Red Hat Enterprise Linux, I believe, on the back end, but everybody else uses CentOS, which is a fork of RHEL, and it's called the Community Enterprise Operating System. And the Community Enterprise Operating System gives them a lot of the stability and at a lower cost, but exactly no cost. But where is this thing? There it is. But they don't get the enterprise support that you would normally get from the Red Hat team. So basically, what happens there is that they're kind of on their own with the operating system portion of it for the workstations, but then they get the support for their back end, which is very important because you don't want to have a whole bunch of stuff sent off to the render farm and it doesn't freaking work. The other thing that is really good about, say, using Linux is that you can build in-house tools on top of stuff because most of your operating system is open source. So there's been a long push. There's been a push for years for Adobe to make Photoshop for it, or make their suite actually. Let me get this applied here really quick, and maybe I'll do that too. To make stuff like that for Linux, and the thing is that they could, and they have, but they refuse to. Like I said, market share. And so there's the first time that I actually learned about Linux is actually listening to all the older guys in the industry who basically missed using Amigas and Silicon Graphics and things like that and the robustness, and they've been actually asking a bunch of developers to make things for Linux. Now Maya has a Linux version. And Modo was actually me see if this works because it does. Awesome. Um, because they know that their AAA studios actually use that stuff, and they want to offer as much support as they can. Other companies don't, which is kind of weird because I come from, like I said, using Lightwave, and Lightwave first came out on one of those types of operating systems. I'm not going to make this too accurate, uh, but it's kind of interesting that the original developers of Lightwave went on to create Luxology, which created Moto, and then they created support for Linux, and New Tech doesn't. It's just kind of weird to me. I don't know how to explain it. You have people that are Black Magic Design is making DaVinci Resolve, and they actually make it for I think it's CentOS. Usually is what they recommend that you use if you're going to use that, and it should work kind of flawlessly. But that's because the studios are using again RHEL and CentOS. So um, they're going to produce whatever is needed to get the job done, right? And wherever the demand is, and there's a lot of demand for using Linux, and of course that is also because of the um, cost effectiveness for the studios. I mean, come on, you got to go. It's not all about the money. You can produce proprietary software, and people will purchase it because they want to put it on a more stable platform. And actually, Blender I find runs much better on Linux type operating systems, and the frame rate and all that other stuff is really, really smooth in comparison to um, Windows. And I know it seems like it's kind of um, a subjective thing, but it seems like I get better frame rate out of this than I get out of, say, Windows, especially when using Blender. So come down here. I don't know if I should have done it that way. It's probably not the best way to do it. Um, but that's why I'm using Linux in a lot of this stuff, and why there's a big push for it, because the people that are in the know and that use this stuff all the time and in their profession, they want something that has that stability. They want something that actually produces stuff, and they want something that is cost effective, and they want something to develop on top of that is open source, so that they can really get into the nitty gritty of things and customize it to their needs. And right now, Linux is the only operating system that does that. And it's perfectly capable of doing whatever you want it to do. And so I'm not really sure what the answer is in getting it out there most of the time, because many people who are proponents of using Linux are frustrated at the fact that there isn't that much push to, um, in, I guess, the private sector, the personal computing part out there. But there are plenty of people that are using Linux that are, in a professional arena. What the heck? Oh, okay, let's just do this. And I don't like that either. Um, I don't like how that turned out either. I should probably just go. Eh, I guess we'll still use it like that. That's pretty good. But they don't take it home. Everybody's working on Windows because it just, like, they flooded the market, and then you have a lot of people that are coming into the industry and they're used to Windows. And you can get an operating system in Linux that runs pretty close to what Windows runs like, and have a good time with it. So Where's the disconnect on the public? I'm not really sure. I don't know what that answer is. Um, I've had people. I tell that people I use Linux on a daily basis, and they're like, "Well, don't you need to be technically savvy for it?" And I'm like, "Well, reluctantly, I have to say." Actually, nowadays I say no, but yes. And oh, that jacked everything up, didn't it? Because in the past, what I would have said is yes, but no. um, let's see what happened here. I think something got twisted around. That's the thing that happened. It got all twisted around. And the reason why I would say um, no but yes today and yes but no in the past is because in the past you did have to have some sort of like technical abilities, and you still do kind of today, but not quite to the extent. I mean, you can pretty much install something that's simple for somebody to use, and then say, okay, uh, get at it, and they'll do a a really good job in transitioning into using Linux. And um, on the technical side, yeah, sometimes you need to enter into the terminal. Sometimes you need to go online to find help and stuff like that. But usually, there aren't too many people that are thrown off by it if they just give it a chance. And it's just weird that the first time that I heard about Linux was, like I said, when all these other guys and gals were talking about how they love to use the Amiga and how they miss, the type of file systems and things like that within it and its capabilities and the tools and just generally everything about it. And you know, we have reluctance of software developers of actually integrating any of that type of stuff into their, I guess, their library of software. God, I really screwed this up. So I don't really know. Don't be afraid of Linux. Okay, Linux is there. It's going to work for you, no matter what you do. It is, and it's a workhorse. And I haven't had too many problems with anything. You'll have problems with like finding software that is proprietary that work on certain things. Like for example, I think DaVinci Resolve has an update, or I mean, an install path, but it's basically produced. And I haven't looked at this in a while. I like DaVinci Resolve, but I haven't really looked at it too much recently because it was developed. The installer was developed mostly for CentOS, but you can get to work on Ubuntu if you follow certain types of things. If you look at um, what is it, AMD's Radeon Pro Render, it's used for their installer works good for example Ubuntu, but it's like 1604. Ubuntu right now is on, what is it? Is it 1904 or whatever? So then installing that stuff doesn't really work too well. Did I just go along normal? I think so. It doesn't work all that fantastic. I've tried with other versions, and usually it just craps out. It doesn't work at all. And like I said, those are the places where you really need to get technically savvy, make sure that all the libraries are in place for you to use, and just nitpicky things that you really have to like do in order to get it to work. And that's kind of unfortunate. But if you're running RHEL or CentOS, or some people, if they're coming from the Windows world, they like something like Manjaro, like myself, that is a rolling release and it stays up to date with most of the latest and greatest stuff, which kind of helps with this technology. Hopefully, CentOS is one of those things, and I'm not really sure that if this is how it works or not, but that it's something that updates the kernel more often, because usually that's where your issues are going to come from. is making sure that you have hardware support. But then again, for some of the things that are in DaVinci Resolve, there's a lot of proprietary codecs and things like that that just aren't available in in Linux, because there were a lot of like file types and stuff like that that just didn't work, and that's why you didn't have the full functionality of it. And that and it kind of sucks that all the licensing of things like that kind of, well, not kind of, it really does limit people in using stuff in Linux. And I just wish that would go away. I don't think it's going to. I know it's just not going to make it there. So, um, not for a while. Not until we start using more open source standards. Uh, Usually I don't want to do it now. I don't want to do it to that either. And I'm not going to lock the things down. Let's just do this really quick. What? Let's just do this. Okay. There we go. Sorry, stream of consciousness things. So, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I really don't. Um, but if you're going to be using open source software that is absolutely amazing, like Blender and things like that, runs perfectly on Linux. In fact, it runs better on Linux, I would say, subjectively. There are also some benchmarks out there that says it does. Most of the developers in the Blender uh, Institute, can't remember if they're working in the Institute or the Foundation, but they develop using Linux. And so there's a lot of potential here. And obviously, you can see that it works just fine. Uh, but I just really wish that there was more of a push out there in the public space that we could sit up here and look at using Linux every day. But it just doesn't seem like it's there just yet. So I don't think that there'd be too much frustration with using Linux anyway. And like I said, I don't get bothered by a whole bunch of stuff. Like with Windows, I don't get bothered with updates all the time. I update when I want to. I don't have uh, oh, like stupid advertisements within the operating system, even though it's Microsoft's own product, telling me to use OneCloud or something like that. It's not throttling any of my performance by pushing an update that I don't exactly want or need right at the time. It doesn't restart in the middle of the night. I know you can sit up here and change some settings to stop all that stuff, but working on a project like this, or then you get into a long render and you need it to happen, and it goes, well, this is the time that you're usually not active, and then it all of a sudden just restarts in the middle of the night, and you're like, oh, okay, so what frame did I end up on, or how far did I get in the render? Did I get the render? It didn't automatically save. I didn't save anything, so I got to start it all over again. Those are the annoying things about Windows. The other annoying things about Windows is that they keep on taking more and more of the settings away. Like, you used to be able to customize it pretty much how you wanted it and make it look how you wanted it to look. Um, as far as the operating system itself, all the colors and fades and stuff like that, especially like when they started out with Vista and went into Windows 7, and then Windows 7, I had Windows 7 Ultimate. I could do a whole bunch of stuff that I didn't really need to do, but it was there if I wanted to. Windows 10, even the Pro version, has locked out a lot of that stuff, and you're going to be editing registry keys to get that stuff done. So, in that sense, I would say that you'd have to be a little bit more technically savvy with Windows just to get some things changed. And a lot of people aren't going to do that. They're going to buy their PC, they're going to sit up here, turn it on, if it, create an account, and it just works. Uh, the user account control that they tried to implement in the past, it was like one of those things where they wanted to make things more secure, that you didn't make changes to the operating system itself or operating system files itself. But a lot of people aren't used to that. If you're using Linux, basically you have to type in an administrative password every time you want to do stuff like that, that will make changes to the base operating system. I don't think people really got the idea of why Microsoft had implemented that within Windows. And so now it's just like clicking an OK. And I'm pretty sure it's easy to write a script out to say, OK, when this dialog comes up, click OK anyway. And it just goes on to do stuff. The constant maintenance, the constant adding in tools to allow me to remove malware or look for viruses and stuff like that. I don't go to any shady websites, so it didn't really bother me too much. But the opportunity is still there. There are so many exploits and stuff. And I'm not saying that Linux is going to be perfect, and that the more and more that it's adopted, the more and more chances there are that stuff like that is going to happen to a Linux user, because somebody's going to be out there and just be a jerk and start taking advantage of people. That's just how it is. Um, but I'm going to terminate this somewhere around here, I think. But it's just, I don't know. I just started getting really upset with using Windows, and one of the things was that I actually, on Pro, I was able to change. There's a tool that allows you to change your master boot record over to UEFI. And the funny thing was that when I updated my system, of course, it was a completely different system. So a multi-billion-dollar corporation is locking down my $1,800 worth of hardware, or whatever it is total, whatever I paid, with $130 worth of friggin' software. Um, it reared its ugly head in Pro. I was able to um, change that with their tool and have nothing wrong with it. But then when I had that home edition and I changed the MBR into UEFI, then it basically said that I didn't have an activated Windows anymore, and then I had to make a phone call, and then I called the Indian call center, and that person wasn't able to help me. He told me I had to call Redmond and stuff. And this is the time when I was bouncing back and forth between Windows 10 and Linux Mint, and that was about the last straw. And I said, okay, I'm sticking with Linux all the way, completely. Windows is getting nuked, and Mint is staying on. Since then, I moved to Manjaro. There were some, stories out there about how Manjaro can be kind of a little bit unwieldy or difficult to use, at times, or it would crash on you. I haven't had a problem with it at all. It's absolutely fantastic. And don't have to be all that technically savvy with it. It runs and it runs and it runs, and I only update it after I take a look at what other people's experiences are with the updates and stuff like that, to make sure that I'm not getting myself into trouble before I update, because I want to keep on working on this stuff and have a stable system to do it with. And it hasn't failed me yet, you know. And when that day comes, then I'm going to have to figure out how I'm going to go about fixing it, right? And that's the beauty of it. How do you go fix it? I like tinkering with stuff. I like fixing problems. So if that happens, then great. It's a learning experience, right? Whatever. Most of the stuff I don't carry on my operating system hard drive anyway, or my SSD. I dump it off to one of my other two hard drives. So I'm always going to have my data available to me. Like, oh, I don't want to do that. So any of these assets that I work on right now, they're being dumped off to another hard drive somewhere else, so that if something crashes, I still have my data and I can still read it. Don't care. That's just a smart way to do it. So, you know, you got to be smart about any type of computing that you do, and I think Linux makes you a little bit smarter because it forces you to be smart. And for all those people that use that stuff in the big studios and the big animation houses and stuff like that, there was a reason why they used it. There's a reason why they miss it. There's a reason why it just is the workhorse and gets things done. There's a reason why a lot of servers for many of the places that you visit on the internet use it. There's a lot of places that use FreeBSD and stuff like that for the same reasons, right? Um, does Windows have its place? Yes. Do I miss using it? Absolutely not. I have to use it every day at work. And, every time I get into it and I have to use it, I'm thinking to myself, I'm glad I kind of left there. Whenever I have to do maintenance on my wife's computer because she says, oh, it runs too slow and it does this and it does that and all this other stuff. And I go, well, I could interest you in a Linux distribution that make that hardware run fast like you've never seen before. You just have to take the plunge if you really want to do it. But I'm not forcing her into it. But every time I have to solve a problem, I don't miss it. Um, yeah, I know this was kind of a ramble. It didn't really go on to very well together, but this is the reasons why when you see me using stuff in Blender and it's this is the reason why I use Linux, why it's in Linux. Just as an example, let's see if I had this in here. Yeah. So I can use stuff like this. Where is it? There we go. And it runs fine. Let's see if it launches. It's been a while since I've actually opened this thing up. I don't want to do that. I want to do that. And if I had a model in here and stuff that I wanted to put things together, as you can see, this thing actually works really good. And I'm using the KDE Plasma desktop, and actually this stuff renders out the fonts and all this other stuff around here. The UI renders out absolutely perfectly, as opposed to the GTK type of stuff in the background to make your window managers work and all that other stuff. It uses Qt and it renders a lot better than GTK, and so I absolutely love this stuff, and it works really good. As you can see, I just everything that I need is here. So, and it's fast, and it actually populates this stuff a hell of a lot faster than Windows does, because it has to index all this stuff. After you install it, it has to index all these little patterns and stuff, and it'll load up here a little bit, but it takes a long time, especially in Substance Designer, to put that in there. And Manjaro just kind of chewed it up, and just there it is. Right when you restart it, it's all there. So anyway, all the tools that you need to use are there. You just have to change the way your workflow and all that other stuff, and get comfortable in it. Give it some time. Don't just get frustrated after a week and give up on it. Give it a couple months, and I'm pretty sure you won't go back. But anyway, hopefully the stream of consciousness that I do next time is going to show us how to model just a little bit more in Blender. All right, so let me get this thing going and stop that, and I'll see you next time.